Today, we'll be talking about the 2008 Detroit Lions, who are seen as one of the worst teams in NFL history in a lot of people's eyes, and tons of people don't understand how this team got any fans to show up to games, or how an organization could even put this team out on the field. Without further ado, let's hop in to the 2008 Detroit Lions.
Before we talk about the roster, today we want to talk about the coach. Rod Marinelli was never really successful as a coach overall. His first pro gig was with the Buccaneers, and he stayed with them from 1996 until 2005 as a defensive line coach, and he was decently successful there. I mean, you can't be a bad coach and coach there that long. And then he ended up at the Lions, his first gig as a head coach, and we all know how that went there. Within his 3-year span with the Detroit Lions, he had a record of 10-38. He's known as a defensive coach, which is extremely ironic seeing as how they had the worst defense in the NFL that year. Teams were putting up, on average, 32.3 points a game. 2008 Lions defense is the third worst by any NFL team since the 1960s. The whole Lions staff was immediately fired after the 2008 season due to lack of preparation, poor technique, and also no adjustments made at halftime. This was on blast the entire season, seeing as how they were 0-16.
But don't let that take away from how bad the roster actually was. The Lions had 3 quarterbacks that started games for them in the 2008 season. Quarterback Dan Orlovsky, John Kitna, and Dante Culpepper, who all combined for a combined record of 0-16. On the year, they combined for 18 touchdowns and 19 interceptions, so they didn't even have a positive touchdown-to-interception ratio. And if we go down to the rest of the roster, only 2 good players that they had in their entire offense were Kevin Smith, who had over 1,000 total purpose yards, and Calvin Johnson, who had 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns with the quarterbacks that I just mentioned. Of course, no player from an 0-16 team was going to make the Pro Bowl, as you can make a case for Calvin Johnson to make the Pro Bowl as a second-year player with that roster and the quarterbacks he had thrown into the ball, but he inevitably did not make the Pro Bowl, rightfully so. The Lions were abysmal on third down, only converting 28% of their third down conversions, and that's going to take you out of a game just like that. If you didn't think this could get any worse, the Lions only threw for 3,300 yards as a team in 2008. Not anywhere close to the amount of yards that you need to be successful, especially at this time. On defense, we already acknowledged the struggles that the Lions had, being one of the statistically worst teams to ever step foot onto an NFL football field. I bet you guys will recognize the name Cliff Avril, as he was on that team. He had a small impact as being a very young player at 22 years old. And outside of Cliff Avril, who was a young rising player, the only other positive on their entire defense was Dwayne White, who had 6.5 sacks that season in only 12 games. This abysmal roster with the horrible coaching that they had gives us an explanation of how this team went 0-16. The Lions set themselves up for this failure in the 2007 offseason when in the draft, they picked no valuable starter or player that would have a good, long-lasting career other than Calvin Johnson, who they took with the 2nd overall pick in the draft. They got rid of their sack leader from the previous season, named Shawn Rogers. I guess they were expecting rookies and young players to step up like Cliff Avril, but that ended up not working out for the Lions. Shawn Rogers had 7 sacks the previous season, and fellow player Jared DeVries had 6.5 sacks in 2007, but only had 2 sacks the following year. If you thought the Lions defense was bad in 2007 when they gave up 27.8 points a game, just imagine how much worse it got in 2008 when they gave up 32 points a game. So with a few marginal differences on their defense, they managed to give up 5 more points per game, which is actually a big difference when deciding close ball games. The 5 more points per game that the Lions gave up in the following 2008 season is largely due to the part that the Lions had a ton of injuries in their 2008 season. Many of their key players like Gerald Alexander, played in only 5 games in the 2008 season, who actually had 2 interceptions and was actually a very good part of their secondary in the 2007 season. Pairing that also with the loss of key additions like fellow safety Kenoy Kennedy and Fernando Bryant, it made their secondary a lot worse, which was subject to give up a lot more passing yards and touchdowns, which we saw in the 2008 season. With the best players that the Lions had in the 2007 season that they lost, and the injuries that they dealt with in the 2008 season, it really gives an explanation of how their defense got that much worse. When it was already the worst defense in the league, it can explain to us why their defense was historically bad in the following 2008 season.
In 2007, they had Joe Kitna, who threw for 4,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 20 interceptions. He was also 35, so he's towards the end of his career. They also drafted a quarterback in the 2008 NFL Draft named Drew Stanton, and they didn't play him at all. He only threw 17 passes all year. They chose to play people like Dan Orlowski, Dante Culpepper, and Jon Kitna. This shows the lack of coaching ability between the offensive coordinator and the head coach, seeing as how they didn't coach up their promising second-round quarterback. Towards the middle of the season, the team became mentally tired, and they weren't giving it their all. This was extremely noticeable on film and also extremely noticeable towards fans.
In other places, people here are mad, and they're going to remain mad at Matt Millen, regardless of what happens, and rightfully so, because of what's happened with his football team.
There was a lot of tension and frustration within the franchise, and this is another reason why they are considered one of the worst NFL teams of all time.
The Lions' 2008 season began at Atlanta, facing against the Falcons, which the game was one of the closer ones they played all season, losing 34-21 as the final score. Their defense was historically bad. This is one of the worst run defense games ever. They gave up 318 yards to the Falcons and was basically the reason why they lost the game. Week 2, the Lions faced the Packers, and this was an absolute blowout, losing to the Packers 48-25. The Lions absolutely dismantled in the fourth quarter when Kitna threw 3 consecutive interceptions in the fourth quarter that led to 3 straight touchdowns for the Packers. And as it was seen at the beginning of the game, the Packers were just too talented and too much for the Lions to handle. Week 3, when they faced the 49ers, it was assault from the start. The 49ers beat the Lions 31-13, and it was never a contest. The Lions ended up having enough of Jon Kitna and actually putting in Dan Orlowski, but he couldn't save the day as the Lions did get pummeled by the 49ers. Week 4, the Lions had a little bit of mercy on them. They did get to have a bye week and prepare for their next week. Week 5, home against the Chicago Bears, the Lions took another absolute awful loss, losing 34-7 to the Chicago Bears, where Dan Orlowski came into the game as quarterback once again. The Lions only managed 185 total yards for the Bears, 425, got absolutely pummeled at home against one of their big-time rivals. Week 6 against the Vikings was the Lions' closest game all season and actually lost basically due to a safety, 12-10. They gave up a safety in the first quarter, which is actually the difference in the score at the end of the game. As it was kind of a defensive battle, the Lions still had quarterback trouble throughout the game, and ultimately was their downfall. The Lions followed this loss up with a few competitive weeks by their standards. They lost to the Texans 28-21, but they had a few highlight plays, Dan Orlowski completing his 96-yard touchdown to Calvin Johnson, and the Lions trying to make a close comeback late in the fourth quarter. Came up short, but it's still a pretty competitive game by the Lions standards. Week 8 at Washington, the Lions took the loss 25-17, and after this horrendous start, the Lions did end up signing Dante Culpepper to come play for them, but he ended up getting hurt, suffering a shoulder injury, going back to their old quarterback struggles that they had in Jon Kitna and Dan Orlowski. Week 9, still being a pretty competitive team the last few weeks, the Lions put up a pretty good fight against the Bears, only losing by 4 points, 27-23, where they gave up a late touchdown in the fourth quarter, which gave them a loss to go 0-8. Week 10 at Jacksonville, the Lions got absolutely pummeled once again, losing 38-14, and before it was even halftime, the Lions were down 24-7, so again, not much of a game here. Going on to Week 11 against the Carolina Panthers, the Lions only lost by single-digit points this game, losing by 9 points to the Panthers. But this game marked the elimination for the Lions from playoff contention as they fell to 0-10. Week 12 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Lions once again got crushed, losing 38-20. This would not set up good for next week as the Lions would play on Thanksgiving against the Tennessee Titans, losing by a whopping 47-10. Which is one of the most embarrassing Thanksgiving games played, and it's the most points ever given up by the Lions on Thanksgiving as they fell to 0-12. Week 14, the Lions played a more competitive game against the Vikings, who they played pretty tight throughout this season, only losing by 4 points, 20-16, but with a tough fourth quarter, the Lions could not get the ball into the end zone to secure the win for them. Week 15 at the Indianapolis Colts, the Lions only lost by 10 points to the Colts, marking their 11th straight road loss, and the Lions falling to 0-14 and 0-4 against AFC opponents. Week 16 was an all-time embarrassment when the Lions lost 42-7 to the New Orleans Saints. They had no answer for Drew Brees, who didn't even play in the fourth quarter. He didn't even have to against this team. The Lions wrapped up their season against the Green Bay Packers, losing by 10 points. where the Packers kind of played around with the Lions for a while, but ended the game with 17 points on the back of Aaron Rodgers, and ended their season as an 0-16 team, and as many see, the worst team in NFL history. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching the video. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, and like the video if you guys did enjoy. Let us know what you think of the 0-16 Lions down below, and if you guys think they're one of the worst teams ever, or if they're better than most people think. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be on the lookout for more videos soon, and thank you guys so much for watching.
Stafford is a Lion, and what a price the Lions put on Matthew Stafford. It is a fat 6-year contract worth upwards of $70 million, with $41.7 million of it guaranteed, meaning we have officially reached the stage in which a player who's never been in the NFL before makes more guaranteed money than anyone else in the league.